Uh, it just shows you how cheap some people can be. The least you'd think they do is put some music behind that intro, and not a bit of it. Not a bit of it. I have to sing myself. No, you're better off without that, I think. Good morning. This is Mirador Television, broadcasting from the White Hart Hotel in Lewis. And it is the 28th of September in the year 2022. And we stagger from bad to worse, from bad to good, or rather the other way around, from good to bad. And who knows what on earth is going on with our leaders. And both sides, it doesn't matter which one they are. Is now the Keir Starmer is beginning to brag for how well Labour would do under the same circumstances, right. It's reflected in the newspapers. Um, I must say that the Conservatives seem to be in one hell of a mess, but we forecast that they would be. The moment that you get the backbenchers twisting the tail of the body corporate, you're in trouble. You really are. So they've only got, if they don't get elected the next session of voters, then they only got themselves to blame. And actually, most members of parliament are thick as two short planks, so they'll never blame themselves. You can see them walking into it. You can see them walking into it. Is a month ago, 6 weeks ago. Did they see it? No, not a bit of it. Not a bit of it. Oh dear, 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 dear. It is a poor show. It is a poor show. But anyway, the Guardian says a Labour moment. Starmer sets out his plan for a return to power, and Sir Keir Starmer gave a keynote speech to his party's conference yesterday. The Guardian quotes Sir Keir saying that, as in 1945, 1964, 1997, this is a Labour moment, and accused the Conservatives of having lost control of the British economy. Well, there you are. Is bound to boast. Bound to boast. Frankly, I don't think one will be better than the other. Well, you know what my stance is. Is clear the lot of them out of the House of Commons and start all over again. The Daily Mirror. Britain will get its future back. A state-owned energy pledge to cut our bills and give a country a fresh start. And Keir Starmer blasts the Tories as fears grow of terrifying surge in mortgage costs. The Mirror describes the speech as rousing and a message of hope. The paper also notes that Starmer's pledge that a Labour government would create a state-owned energy company, GB Energy, and says the policy could slash bills and create wealth for all to share. Yes, yes, yes. What they mean by sharing wealth is, I'm not saying anything that isn't said amongst their own ranks. It means that the money comes into the state. they dole it out and pay themselves increased bonuses and so on. Yeah. Mm. So the Metro, wow, it's the POW, it says. And by that meant the Prince of Wales. And there's a little boy about to give some flowers to Kate as she appears at some do yesterday. But their main headline is Keir, don't forgive. And it says Keir urged voters not to forget or forgive the government's mishandling of the economy at the next general election, and claimed Labour can win a landslide. There you go. He's predicting already. True. Well, who knows? The Financial Times, market turmoil requires tough action from the Bank of England, its chief economist warns. What are we talking about here? The FT quotes Hugh Pill, chief economist at the Bank of England, warning that the debt-funded tax cuts announced by Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng as part of Friday's mini-budget will require a significant monetary response. The paper says forecasters now expect borrowing costs to reach 6.25%, almost triple the current rate of 2.25%. By May next year. The Sun, which normally runs away, they come back into the fray. More misery for homeowners, bricking it. Interest rates to hit 6% next year, and lenders pull 365 mortgage products out of circulation. The paper says the expected rate rise will create a mortgage time bomb for homeowners, and reports that lenders have now pulled a total of 365 mortgage deals from the market. The Times, house pricing, house price warning as the loan rates rise sharply. So we're going to see a lot of houses, homes on the market, whereas in Brexit everybody was buy. Now it looks as if it's going to be sell. The Times reports that providers have begun raising mortgage rates to levels not seen since the financial crisis, and that a combination that would be this financial crisis of 2008, and that a combination of increased rates, inflation, and the risk of a recession could cause house prices to fall by between 10 and 15%. So if you've just bought, sign your belt. The Daily Telegraph, reverse tax cuts, the IMF tells Truss. According to the Telegraph, the International Monetary Fund says the UK government should reevaluate its tax measures and consider more targeted supports, leads the Telegraph. The paper calls it a highly unusual attack on the economic policy of a G7 country, and says it has drawn an angry reaction from senior Tories. The Eye, as PM and Kwarteng ignored officials who warned of markets turmoil, they said. What the Eye is saying is that they were warned by their experts that don't do this because this is what's going to happen. The Eye has an exclusive report which says senior government officials warned Prime Minister Liz Truss and Mr. Kwarteng about the economic risks and possible shock to the markets. Oh, I've got the hiccups of the mini budget. I normally do get the hiccups at this time. But little bits and pieces popping up on the screen, which you can't see. Mr. Kwarteng about the economic risks and possible shock to the markets of the mini budget. And number 10 source has also denied to the paper that the pair had a shouting match over Miss Truss's reluctance to issue a Treasury statement to reassure investors as the pound sank on Monday. Oh, yeah, it's falling out. Trouble back at the ranch. The Daily Mail, it's pulled the Sun. It is dashed away from the turmoil. It says that Lawrence Killer's sickening selfies from his jail cell is going to land him in hot water. What it says is one of the killers of Stephen Lawrence, a very famous race murder a few years ago, faces a criminal probe after breaching prison rules and securities by acquiring a smartphone and using it to make calls and send selfies from his cell. The Mail says searches were underway and Mr. Norris could have his jail sentence extended. Back to calling people Mr. again. Daily Express. A twindemic alert. Go get your jabs. The Express is also walking away from the turmoil. A traditional government supporter. It's talking about the pandemic and the fact that it could rear its ugly head again in the autumn. The Express says that a twindemic of COVID and flu viruses could wreak havoc on the health service this winter. It adds there are fears that immunity to the flu fell significantly during the pandemic, and that anyone eligible for a jab is being urged to get one as soon as possible. There you go. Daily Star. Well, it's gone back to its love of space. 180, it says. Bullseye. NASA, or NASA, whichever you want to pronounce, crashes a 300 million pound DART spacecraft into an asteroid to prove they could save humanity. NASA's successful mission to crash a spacecraft into an asteroid to test whether it could be diverted on any future object on a collision course with Earth. The paper describes the mission as one giant bullseye for mankind. Wow, there we are. So a lot of conflict as usual from the papers. And let's just take a peek at the weather, shall we? A peek at the weather. And it's going to reach about 15 degrees today, which is quite chilly. Scattered cloud and a moderate breeze. Of course, it's always the wind that actually dictates the weather level, or the temperature level. I can remember my wife, who was born on the Canadian prairies, saying that she remembers that the wind was so strong that it created a chill factor. That is the real cold, not what the absolute temperature does. As the real cold, it was minus 60 degrees. Can you imagine that? You could barely move in that. Wow. Absolutely incredible. Now, normally you would be tuning in today, and indeed we invited you to yesterday, to have the daring duo of Max Hurd and Stuart Dolby on together, tearing one another's guts out, beating one another to a pulp as they arrive at a consensus. Yes, they quite like one another, actually. Their fight on television is legendary. They actually normally take a while to look at energy prices. Energy Matters is Stuart's program, and then he's got a new scheme going. Some people, Glyndebourne, for instance, not being very helpful, but then you don't expect it, do you? Local? Oh my goodness me, no. Oh my dear, we get all our people from elsewhere. We want to do. Stuart is going to do a conversation with Stuart Dolby, and he's got a gentleman who was a photographer many years ago at Glyndebourne, and who wanted to relive some of his memories, show some of his old photographs, and be interviewed. And we asked if we could do it in the grounds. And very curt, no, we can't help you on this occasion. It is funny, isn't it? I'm sorry to say it, but I am a lousy businessman. Believe me, I am the worst businessman in the world, and I am not very good at practical things like hammering. But communications, I do understand, and it's such a poor level today. It really is such a poor level. And if you want to know what my track record is, well, I've done PR for Harland and Wolff, for Short Brothers, for British Airways, for PricewaterhouseCoopers. So I know a little bit about what it should be as opposed to what it is. So every time we get one of these little, it just makes me laugh. Really, it does not help the cause of Glyndebourne. Mind you, they don't have to worry about getting bums through seats and sitting on the grass, sipping champagne out of a wicker basket. They don't have any problem at all. But the funny thing is that quite often a reputation is as important as the number of people that flood through the gates, and they have lost that plot entirely. Oh well, never mind, never mind. I'm sure that if we had been the Times, we would have got a much more positive view. This lot are just down the road. Oh well, never mind, never mind, never mind. I bump into all sorts of people that have a great deal to do with Glyndebourne, and sometimes the performers themselves. So my little story, which I shall turn into an after dinner story, it will be loads of fun. Anyway, why was I telling you that? Because we have. Why was I telling you? I have no idea. No idea at all. But I do know that I was giving you the weather, and the weather is going to be fairly cool, but not a bad day all in all. And I'm looking out onto the Lewis High Street, and you can see the courthouse is reflecting the early morning sun. So by all means, get out there and enjoy yourself. One of the things that we did yesterday is we showed you an episode of The Bloody Past of a Tiny Town, which is our acclaimed documentary about the blood that has been spilled in this town. And we did it in two parts. But today we will show you another episode which has which is part of the overall 8-part series. Many people will remember it. Many people in Lewis enjoyed it. There are lots of more who have come in and who have never seen it. So there you are. We're going to show an episode of that this morning. I haven't even had chance to take a look at the back pages of the paper, but let us see. Oh dear, Gary Neville is all over the place. He was political yesterday, and now he's telling Gareth. I've forgotten Gareth's other name. Isn't that silly? Anyway, he's telling the England coach, and with Gareth Southgate, of course. How silly. Is he telling England's coach to get Harry Maguire to see a psychologist to help him through his slumping form. Maguire was at fault for two of the goals England conceded in Monday's 3-3 draw against Germany, casting further doubt on his international future and increasing calls for the centre-back to be dropped for the World Cup. I've been there, said Neville. Every player has, and when I lost my confidence, I saw a psychologist to help me through those moments. But there's nothing you can do other than show up, try your best, and not give in. At some point, his form will return. I would suggest he does that in the meantime. Right. Right. Um, let's just have a look at the other inside pages. If Harry is not playing for United, he's a risk too far for the World Cup. But Gareth is sticking by his striker and says that Maguire is wonderful fighting stuff. They're all having a row. And my hands are tied. Countdown conundrum for Southgate, who won't see players again until a week before Qatar. Right. So, in other words, he's not going to be able to tell them what's right and what's wrong and put them through their paces for England because they'll all be playing for their clubs. Ukraine 0 and Scotland drew 0. But that was in the something cup. For all Northern Ireland, I'm afraid, it went down 3-1 to Greece. And there's life in one of the academies. Brooke must be in our best T20 team now. Butler's seriously impressed with Big Harry. So there's an assessment of the players for the England cricket T20 team. As I don't understand T20, it doesn't fizz on me at all. But I do think that I can give you just a little bit of something about energy, which Stuart would be giving you today if he wasn't ill, and if in fact it struck both of them, is that booming gas prices lift shares in Serica Energy, and Serica Energy became the latest North Sea stock to cash in on booming prices of natural gas. It posted a surge in profits, and the AIM-listed firm reported a profit of 194 million for the first 6 months of the year, up from 2.2 million for the same period in 2021, as its production rose to an average of 26,000 barrels equivalent a day from 18,000 last year. And so what it's doing is it's shelling out money to its stockholders. That's where it goes, you see. Never mind the cost onto the consumer. The bank warns a bumper rate hike after a market rout. Let's see. Ruth Sunderland, writing in the Mail, says, Quarting needs to move fast. In other words, he can't let the slide in sterling continue. But one thing that we have in this country is an independent central bank. So he's going to have to go and sit down with the bank CEO, and he's going to have to sort of say to him, "Look, I need you to hold this slide, help me hold this slide," which is actually one of the jobs of the bank. So that's where the papers stand this morning, and God bless them. So let me take you now to our normal watering hole. Let's see. Yes, we should have it here. Here it is. This is for those of you who are new to Mirador Television. Is we have what we call our Potter's Wheel. The Potter's Wheel was something that the BBC used in the early days of television to fill in the gaps between programs. So we call our little sting that does the same thing for us the Potter's Wheel. In fact, it is Southover Grange Park in Lewis, a lovely little, not watering hole, a lovely environment in which to spend a couple of hours. We have only got a minute. done, the energy companies. They're full of bright ideas to help their customers. Now they've made power so expensive that for an average house such as this, you can't afford to heat it. So you don't need appliances such as this. But that means you also don't need a fridge, because you can keep your groceries cool and fresh without it. The house is cold enough. Well done, chaps. Oh, that's a little tweak of the energy company's tale. And if those of you who are new to Mirador and new to Lewis wondered what the promo was about with the knight's helmet, well, first of all, that knight's helmet is Mirador's logo, and it is a helmet of a medieval knight, or the sculpture thereof, sitting in the park, the Priory Park, which was the grounds of the Lewis and Pancras Priory between 1080 and 1540 or thereabouts, when the Vandal King, Henry VIII, looking for money, but also wanting to get divorced and therefore divest himself of the influence of Rome, just gave the dissolution of the monasteries. In other words, he shut a lot of them down and pulled them down and raped and pillaged them. And he did that with the Lewis one. However, it was the site in 1264 of the Battle of Lewis, where Simon de Montfort, leading a bunch of dissident barons, took on Henry III in a battle to get supremacy between either the king himself or to share a little bit of it with the barons. And the barons won. And in fact, that is considered to be the true start of a glimmer of English democracy. The Battle of Lewis, 1264, in Lewis, and not all on the site that this monument stands, just a little bit outside the town. But nonetheless, the battle was significant in terms of making sure that the king couldn't get his own way. Purists, of course, will tell you, well, what about Magna Carta, some 50 years ahead of that? And the answer to that is that the King, John, who is always painted as something of a villain, although apparently he was a very good administrator as a king, he signed the Magna Carta and then forgot all about it. So there were 50 years in which the king could do what he likes and collect taxes and spend them on himself, up until Henry III's loss to the barons under Simon de Montfort. A good bit of history there. It is worthwhile going down to that. There isn't a great deal preserved, but there is some. And it gives you some idea of what the priory was about. And although there's not one single bit of it left, the chapel was bigger than Chichester Cathedral and absolutely dominated the town. And it is an interesting thing to wander around and look at some of the foundations and read some of the stuff attached to them as to what that priory was like. It was an incredible complex of buildings. Not only that, but at the time, Lewis was an archipelago of islands. We don't know it as that anymore because it's all been filled in. But that archipelago of islands supported a river called the Winterbourne, which now is just a mild stream. in running through Priory Park. No, it doesn't run through Priory Park. I take it back. It runs through the park attached to the manor house, which was owned and lived in by the Newtons, and which indeed did have and does have lots of cladding on it from the cathedral or the church, the chapel, that was pulled down by the forces of Henry VIII, but raised in the time of William the Conqueror by the wife of William de Varenne, the first Lord of Lewis, after the war and the Battle of 1066. So there you are, a bit more history indeed. Now, what was I going to tell you? I've forgotten what I was going to tell you. As a consequence, I better just tell you something else that springs to mind. And I think that yesterday, we had in a representative of Lewis District. Not Lewis District, Lewis Town Council, to chat to Stuart about what's happening with the bus station. Well, the bus station at the moment is out of service, and the tenants, who are a restaurant and a little a cafe bar, a hole in the wall, have been given notice to quit as of not the day after tomorrow, the 30th of September. And the debate was, why has it reached this pretty pass? And how people from the Parks Authority, National Parks, who are actors, planning authority for this region, and the various councils and others who have objected, been ignored, so that the developer can make sure that he can wait it out and eventually build whatever it is that he wants to build. The whole issue really was about housing and the fact that there is no affordable housing. And everybody says when they're going to build these things, they put into their plans affordable housing. But I must say that the policies of the local council have not been helpful towards having true affordable housing. If you're talking about somebody who needs to get first rung of the ladder, or somebody who's on the housing list, the chances are that they are not going to get what they want. And that's very sad. But it's partly because the town changes with its citizens. And at the moment, we've got a lot of people who bought during the pandemic or prior to that, who like Lewis, and quite rightly so. And one welcomes people who like Lewis. But they quite often are here for bed and breakfast purposes. In other words, they have a big salary from a job in the city, and they only really come home to get their wives who have been with their prams and their knitting in the parks and so on all day, get their wives to cook them a meal and go to sleep, and then ready to start up, and up they go to town again and make a lot of money and eat up there and so on and so forth. So a lot of services that you would expect in a town of this size aren't here. The hotels, this one, and Shelley's, that's something else we must get on to. The hotels don't serve meals anymore. The White Hart, where I am at the moment, does serve a breakfast, but it's tied into bed and breakfast, and not something for people passing on the street. And the Shelley's has been closed before the pandemic and hasn't reopened. And so as a consequence, the food level, the food desire, and the food outlets in this town are few and far between. Having said that, a new one just opened up. It's don't know what it's called, but it's a Turkish restaurant just on the edge of the cliff area and near to Fuego and to Bill's, who are restaurants, but not in the highest level. There's one small restaurant on Station Street, can't remember what it's called, but it charges an arm and a leg for a very small amount of food. And it is, by all accounts, not a bad restaurant, but for what you get, it's very expensive. By the way, I better take a look at the time. It's 9:10. It's 10 minutes past 9. For those of you who wish to get up and get going, it's 10 past 9 on the day of the 28th. But yes, the Shelley's, which is the other hotel, is standing forlorn and bedraggled. But when I first came to Lewis, that was the place where you went for a really swish meal. It was very posh indeed. It has lovely grounds. It was furnished beautifully. It is, all in all, not a bad hotel in the scheme of things, but it ain't a hotel at the moment. Its doors are padlocked. Now, I'm told that it's owned by somebody who is a property developer and who is trying to wait out the council until they give in and say, yes, okay, you can do what you want. If I blackened his name, then I hope that he's in a forgiving mood. But I think that's outrageous, absolutely outrageous. And we could do with more hotels. And we could do with the high level of cuisine that is on show in that sort of hotel. The experts say that what happens is that if you've got competition, then the standard of service and the standard of food and the standard of hotels and restaurants in any given community goes up. Well, we don't have two hotels competing. We don't have any hotels competing. So their standard is in the rooms that they let. And I have to say that the White Hart Hotel, where we are at the moment, if you look at the back of me, you can see the rafters. It's a very ancient hotel. And it does a pretty fair job. But it's not doing dinners at the moment because nobody else does dinners. So who's it got to compete with? That's the sort of thing that we start to lose if we don't support some of these smaller places on the high street. And there is every evidence that with the bus stop, the bus terminus, in the way that it is that there isn't much of an appetite to help with that. And yet we moan about Lewis High Street, or not just Lewis High Street, the death of the high street we have, the death of the high street, and nobody is mourning it. Even though stores are closing down left, right, and center, nobody seems to be mourning it. And it's time that we did, and we got some activity going. The fact of the matter is, you do nothing, nothing gets done. There's no sense in sitting there and saying, well, we'll wait for the legislation to change. Not good enough. It's action. And we should make sure that we've got a leadership that is full of action. But I fear that most of them now, and certainly the executive, is in Eastbourne. What the hell does Eastbourne know about Lewis? Sweet be all. Just as we tend not to know anything about Eastbourne, except for its seafront, which is rather pretty and rather nice. But about the town generally, no. And then we wonder why we don't get people coming into the town with wads of money. Bonfire brings in plenty of people, and they try to keep them out. At least the authorities do. And yet that's a night that brings in large quantities of cash. Why on earth do we try to why do we try to keep them away? It's all beyond me. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, and a lot of the stuff that we do isn't logical. The councils cry wolf. The state of the high street, the state of our services, and so on, based on the amount of money flooding into the town. Well, that's one time that the money does flood into the town in a very real way. What do? We don't let the trains stop here. We put up warnings to people, don't come into Lewis. What absolute rubbish and nonsense. Can you imagine New York for its Labor Day parade or its Shamrock Parade for Irish independence? Can you imagine them saying to people, oh, don't come? We've got parades on the streets. Don't come. I think that many citizens, particularly the new ones, would very quickly get up in arms. Where are we now? Where are we now? Well, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn to the episode that we have. I could actually show part of the episode that we showed both parts yesterday. All right. Now, yesterday we said we were going up to the gallops. We were going up to the old Lewis racecourse. And in days gone by, up until 1960 some odd, and we tend to think of that as yesterday, or at least I do, 1966, thereabouts, and the last race on Lewis racecourse took place. And part of it was that the roads were jammed and you couldn't get through Lewis. I don't think there's a bypass in operation at that particular time. So what they do, they ban or do away with or make it difficult for the race people to carry on. That's not joined up thinking either. There was something like 60-odd stables in the town. The races brought in all sorts of people with money because the gamblers came. It was deemed to be a very, very good course. It had top jockeys such as Sir Gordon Richards and others of renown coming in to ride on them. And in the old days, when the Prince Regent was here, towards the early and middle days of the 19th century, crowds of 10,000 were reported to go up onto the downs to the racecourse to watch him watching the racing. We do tend to shoot ourselves in the foot and kill the calf that lays the golden egg. No, calves don't lay golden eggs, do they? is to kill the goose who lays the golden egg. Let's see what it's all about, shall we? Because it's a fascinating. And if you go up there, you can still see evidence of the course. Part of the track is still there. The grandstand has been turned into dwellings, and there are still actively a couple of stables. But to reduce from 60 some odd to 2 is a sad, sad occasion.
Vroom, vroom. The other day I felt a warmth between myself and Mole and Ratty, the two little characters from Wind in the Willows, as I sat on the banks of the River Ouse and let it drift by. Vroom, vroom. Today I feel more like Toad of Toad Hall, the animal that was always getting himself into trouble because of his excesses. Vroom!
But horsepower is the essence of this episode, because horses played a central part in the history of Lewis. And as might be expected, were often at the centre of violence,
Adding to the history of a bloody town.
Horses, of course, were nothing unique to Britain. Cavalry had been a major part of warfare, and peaceful farming from time to time immemorial. But for Lewis in early times, they were an important part of its economy. The Domesday Book, the first ever audit of England in 1086, records that anyone selling a horse in Lewis should pay to the reeve or estate manager a penny. The buyer also paid a penny. So a horse tax was in place more than 1,000 years ago. And so the horse took centre stage from the earliest of Norman times. I've shown you the tilting grounds where knights on horseback tried to unseat each other. But that was nothing compared to the violence that Lewis races brought to the town.
But I get ahead of myself. Lewis was one of the most famous racecourses in history until 1965.
The fourth oldest in the country, racing began in 1727, although some argue there is evidence it was 26 years before that.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Lewis. It's the final race meeting here at Lewis, Monday, September the 14th, 1964. The ground is firm and the wind is straight across the course. The runners for the first race, the Cookmere Apprentices Handicap, are on their way to the start. Saucy Lad representing Tom Masson in the purple with the gold star. Number 11 is Nimberg. And away they go. They're off and racing, and Buzz made a bright start there and leads in the early stages. And now a little bit of a rise as they race past the mile marker and head towards the right-hand turn, which will bring them into the home straight. Closing stages with less than 100 yards left to travel. It's Buzz pulling clear, and Buzz goes on to win by about 3 lengths to Misty River in second, Saucy Lad back in third, Great Lady, Nimberg Wave, Methane, the Wolf, and St. Kieran.
In that year, after almost 300 years of horse racing, it closed down for good, mainly because it had no electricity, no running water, in fact, no facilities at all. Yet in the late 18th century, it attracted royalty, the big gamblers of the day, and it produced some champion racehorses over the years that brought great races and great feats to an otherwise pretty but blustery track atop the Downs. Considered by racing folk as the greatest racehorse of all time, Eclipse raced there in 1769. The Derby winner of 1793, Waxy, was a Lewis-trained horse, as was Charlottetown in 1966. Great jockeys rode there, such as Lester Piggott and Gordon Richards.
And Barry, you've, although it started in 1720 or so, you weren't here then, but you were, as a very young boy, involved in this racecourse.
Yeah, I certainly was, yeah. I'd say I was born on race day, 29th of August 1950. My mum's side of the family were all racing people, going back hundreds of years probably, so, you know, my gran used to take us up here.
It's very quiet and serene today, so what was it like on race days up here?
Very, very noisy. Hustle and the bustle of coaches coming up here, cars. I mean, all these places over here were car parks. You had all the horse boxes, the tote men, tic-tac men shouting the odds and everything else. Lots of entertainment going on, you know, and it was very, very busy. A 4-mile race which started right down the bottom of the hill there, the horses used to run right round there as far as you can see, and come back down here to the winning post. They used to have 2 winning posts. They used to have a 5 furlong winning post and a 6 furlong winning post. But what they did, they made the 6 furlong winning post another furlong away from the stands, because they both wanted to start them on the straight. Otherwise it was unfair, so they had a straight run.
Right.
In 1914, I think it was 14, they shut that down because they find it was too dangerous, and not only that, for the horses to get up that hill. They used to start them from here, they run them down there, round the loop and back again. And that made 4 miles, but it had to be like the best out of 3 or something.
Right.
So some of them horses run 12 miles
Yeah.
just to win a race. They had 10 minutes break. They got back after about 9 or 10 minutes. They'd have a bucket of water, drink and wash down, and back they used to go again. After a while, it just phased out a little bit. It used to be a 3-day meeting in August, and then it got to that it was just going to be a day a year. And it got to the stage where it was just one race, and all the horses in that race were trained in Lewes. And the guy that wrote about it, he said this is probably going to be the last day.
There are many in Lewes who are still resentful that the course was closed. It brought a good deal of cash to the town. Lewes had many racing stables, and a thriving racing community numbered as many as 60 establishments.
But perversely, it was responsible for cleaning up the sport, despite suffering a bout of violence.
The early part of the 20th century saw the rise of vicious gangs around the country. These gangs often fought each other, but to keep cash in their pockets, they targeted racecourses. They would secretly ease their way into courses and then meet up to viciously attack and rob bookies. Racegoers, and even jockeys. They were feared at race meetings throughout Britain. And so it was on a June afternoon in 1936. London villain James Spinks and his gang turned up at Lewes for an attack on bookies. They gathered, some 30 strong, on the edge of the racecourse, ready to pounce. And pounce they did. They attacked and savagely beat a bookie and managed to rob him.
But not known to them, 2 CID officers had been posted in the grounds.
The 2 detectives alerted their fellow coppers and raced towards the gang. According to some reports, a rival gang got into the act and all hell broke loose. It must have been some sight. Villains scattering in all directions. Keystone cops were in full chase, and the excited racegoers panicked and dived for cover. But it was the police on this day at Lewes Racecourse who passed the winning post. They managed to nick 16 of the gang, took them to Lewes, where they were sentenced to long prison terms. That put an end to the decades-old practice of course hijacking by these fearless and vicious gangs.
A real feather in the cap of the Lewes coppers. Nabbed.
Pulling you aside, locals will whisper in your ear that Graham Greene's Brighton Rock was really about Lewes Racecourse. They say the gang fight in his novel was based on the events of Lewes in 1936. To think that Pinky strode this course, what a ghost to have here now.
Yes, I'm sorry. The sound, as usual, cut off my words of wisdom as we came back from the Lewis racecourse. But of course, to put that into context, those gangs were Peaky Blinder gangs, and they were known for their viciousness and how they actually attacked bookmakers and wealthy punters. And from all accounts, it was just like the Keystone Cops up there, because two gangs turned up at the same time, two rival gangs, and they both assumed that they could have a go at the bookies and load their pockets, only to find that there was a copper on board, but they assumed that they'd been set up and that the police were there in force, when in fact they were just two policemen, special branch as the CID, who were there to try and make sure that the bookies stayed safe. As a consequence, the two gangs panicked and tried to get away with just two coppers in hot pursuit. And apparently one is jumped on his on the back of one of the policemen, who fought him off, much like a bucking horse. It must have been one hell of a funny sight, except that these people were very, very serious people. And it was a very brave policeman, where only a couple of them managed to get a good half dozen or so of the ringleaders into a paddy wagon and bring them down to Lewis prison. They appeared in Lewis Crown Court and were given bail to appear. But they were then returned to jail, because I think they'd gone about boasting they would never be brought to trial. And they actually bust in loads and loads and loads of people from Birmingham and various areas where they had, what should we say, friends or associates, and to try and intimidate the judge into letting them go and not charging them. And the judge and the prosecuting counsel were very brave people, and they marched out of the court and went through the crowds of jeering, hooting people, and didn't let it affect their trial of these people on the basis that they had attacked and injured, indeed, some bookmakers, bodily harm, of course, for which the Peaky Blinder crew were well known. The gangs were given something like 8 to 10 years, and it sent a message that the police and the courts were neither bent in this part of the world, nor were they afraid of being intimidated by loads of people harassing them and yelling at them. And it virtually signaled an end to the gangs beating up racecourses. This was in about 1930 some odd. Lewis was still a very thriving course, and people still went up there to ogle the rich and the famous, as well as look at the races, which were in themselves very colourful affairs. Very tough course. That is now lost to some extent in history. I personally would love to see some sort of sprint race take place on the course to relive old times. The big problem is that now much of that land has been sold. The grandstand is a house or two houses. There's several other houses built and some on the course. There are still gallops. Horses still run there, are trained there, but it's a shadow of its former self, of its former glory. There are no great days when the town was jammed, where famous horses were on show, and famous jockeys, for that matter. It is no longer there in that sense. And I wish that they would bring it back. There are people who have tried very hard to do that sort of thing. Barry Fuchs is one of them, who grew up on that track. You saw Barry being interviewed there about what it was like on race days. And he does his best. And one of our own people that worked with us for a while, but unfortunately are now not very well, seems to be catching at the moment, is Tony Johnson. And Tony has done an enormous amount of research on the track. And we'd like to actually, that was a segment in our program in the morning and in our documentary, which was all about the bloody past, not so much about racing as such. But Tony has got all sorts of stuff. Barry has got the contacts in the racing industry. I'd love to bring them all together and make a documentary. We did actually try to do a program on racing with Barry, but it turned out to be too complicated for what we were able to do with our resources and with their resources as well. But what the heck, we can give it a good old college try. We can indeed. Right, okay, let us catch up with a few things. I have to put my... Oh, I know. Here's one of the programs that we want to bring back that we did pre-lockdown. It speaks for itself, I think. Well, there we are. Whoops, I couldn't play it again. Another in our effort to do the in the tail of some of the authorities here. We done on the heating companies, the energy companies. This is sometimes our view of the local councils. We didn't name the council, we just call it the Lewis Council, and showed that sometimes democracy is dying. And that is one of the tragedies, the real tragedies of our modern society. Never mind the pound slumping, never mind COVID, never mind Brexit, never mind cost of living, it's our democracy, our ability to guide our own future, our own welfare, that is at stake in many instances and many decisions that are made, not just here in Lewis, but across the country, and in fact, across the globe. I had an email from my sister-in-law who lives on the far west coast of Canada. And she said, Keith, I'm 77 and I've suddenly become a warrior against the government who are closing down our rights to freedom of speech. And this is in soppy old Canada, who all the people always fancy themselves as being terribly, terribly nice. Everybody loves Canadians. Well, yeah, we did, but their government is as bad, if not worse, than our own. And I think the world has got to start to come to grips with the fact is that governments are being taken over by powermongers, that the sense of duty has gone, that they no longer want to work on behalf of the citizen, but to fill their own pockets. And to do that, they have to silence the voices of criticism. Well, they haven't tried to silence us yet. At least I don't think so. I haven't had anybody come and knock on the door with a gun in his hand. But there we go. Yes. We do tweak the tale of people, and Lewis Consul is one of those that we one of those little programs where we're able to do that. And we're not offensive. No, we're not. We're not offensive at all. Right, okay. I think it's what we need to do is to let's take a trot through some of the promos that we've got, and there are some that are pretty interesting. But let us first of all play something that we really quite like, because what we have to do is to sell our town, and we like Lewis, and we call upon you who live here, whether it's from a short period of time or a long period of time. Like Lewis. It's a very likable town. Wow. Lots and lots and lots. It's a lovely town. It's a lovely town. It is not going through its best period at the moment because some idiot way back in 10 years ago or something decided that it would make sense to move the executive, in other words, the people that do most of the things, and join it with Eastbourne. The craziest piece. I mean, it just shows the paucity of ideas and thoughts of our leaders. And nobody will do anything about it now. They ponce around talking about all sorts of green issues and red issues and blue issues and issues. Will anybody realize that this town suffers very badly from that decision and that it needs reversing? And no, they keep on taking bits and bits and bits away. Absolutely crazy. And those are the people we elected. Oh my God. And I don't care. Many of them are very nice people. I'm not suggesting they're not. But when it comes to running something, they are completely hopeless. Completely hopeless. I mean, I have to say, I'm completely hopeless at it. And I have not had the temerity to stand for either the council or to try and get a job on it. I know how bad I'd be, but I couldn't be any worse than the people we've got at the moment. And some of the decisions that are made, it's absolutely outrageous, outrageous. And they have no shame whatsoever. They all keep telling us what a wonderful job they've done. Yeah, thank you very much. You really do. You really, really do keep us going, don't you? But mind you, we are just as bad ourselves, if not worse, because what we do is we don't vote in elections. We turn out, a third of us turn out. In national elections, 2/3 of us turn out. But it is not something with which our society is imbued with a lot of appetite. But wait then and see what we have to handle when things go wrong. Wow. And then there's a lot of yelling and screaming. But actually, we really we don't. We really don't have the right to do so when we've abrogated our responsibility for voting the way that we have. It's unconscionable. We should hang our heads in shame instead of pouncing up and down as we do, and as our representatives do. I have no idea why someone will ever get into politics. I suppose it makes them feel big. And in fact, they turn themselves into something quite small. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. As if you didn't know that already. The mouth. Yes, indeed. I can wax lyrical when I want to, and indeed often do. It's always amazed me that somebody hasn't come in here and tried to break my nose for some of the things I say. The fact of the matter is, if we don't have a good critical situation, then we cannot expect anybody to pay attention to us. We can't expect it at all. We just have to put up with what we've got. We don't have to put up with it. We can raise our voices. We're dissuaded by governments who really don't want to have their innards picked over by the likes of you and me. But a Harvard review has said that we get worse governance and higher taxes if we don't have media picking over the bones, if you like, the live bones, like vultures, of those people who purport to represent us and to guide us. We've had some pretty awful things take place in the last 2 years. And it's our fault. It's our fault. And it's time that we actually started to get our act together. You know, one of the interesting things is that in talking to Canadians, they suddenly realized what the truckers' revolt was about. It wasn't about just the truckers themselves saying their conditions had worsened. It was about the fact that that government is worsening the lifestyle and the freedoms of everybody in Canada. That's what that was about. And I have it on good authority, not only from my sister-in-law, but from a number of other people that I know there. And I know many people. I was in media there for 15 years. And I know who I can trust for an assessment and who I can't. And the media, particularly, are very concerned at what the Canadian government is doing. Mind you, I'm a little bit surprised. I was there under the father of the present Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. I was there when his father, Pierre Trudeau, was there. And he was a very controversial figure. And in many ways, many people see him as actually hammering a new divide between what they now call First Nation, in other words, the Indian population, and the basic Canadian civilian population. Was he? Yes, he was. Some of his legislation was awful. It's awful. And the trouble is, quite often, it's legislation now that makes you suffer down the line. Oh, well, there we go. That's what we're after at the moment. I'm just looking to see whether we've got a little something to play. And the hotel is very quiet this morning. I would try to hijack somebody to bring them in to chat to them, but I don't think that would be a good idea. Oh dear. We're not doing we're not doing very well this morning. Not doing very well at all. You'll have to forgive me because I had to two of our chaps both ill today, and normally it would be their show. So I didn't exactly prepare myself for this program. But I'm struggling along to try and bring you something of worth, of interest on a local level. But as we say, we are local, but not parochial. So we're the best one in the world. It is not our thought that we are going to report on lost cats and dogs. There are other people. Mick Symes runs good online stuff for that sort of thing. There is a radio station which can do it, and it's not for us. It's not for television. So having said that, we do try to serve you in a good many other ways. Right, okay. Let's. Hang on. I know what we can take a look at. This is. He said. This is some of the things that we used to make to get people to take a look at Lewis and so on. It won't do us any harm to take a look at these.
If ever I had a video, would you dance in it? Would you dance in it?
Oh, well, the answer to that is yes, I would. But these things are so old. They tend to
If ever I had
rather abruptly. So
a
let's begin.
video, would you dance in it? Would you dance in it?
There we go. Yes, I would is the answer. Yes, I would. I think perhaps it's time to look at something a little longer, and let us go back to one of the series episodes in the bloody part of a tiny town, which we played recently, but a lot of you miss it, and a lot of you really quite like it. So let's just take a look at. I think we can take a look at another episode. I think we can. Oh, here's something that I think is yes, it's something we should actually bear in mind.
(1970 to 1989), not so long ago.
Not very smooth this morning, is it? No. It's a pity, really, because I'm searching for various bits and pieces, and since I am on my own this morning, I ask for just a little indulgence, if that's the right word. Let's see if we can find the. What I'm looking for, basically, is the episode of there we are. This is the one that we showed inadvertently when we thought it was the races. I think some of you might find it interesting, although some of you will have seen it before. Let's go.
He sat on the bank while the river still chattered onto him, a babbling procession of the best stories in the world. That was the excitement that Mole experienced in the story Wind in the Willows. And indeed, rivers large and small everywhere all have many stories to tell. The River Ouse that flows through Lewes is no different. In fact, for much of the town's history, it has played an important part. Today, the river carries nothing but pleasure craft. But for a long time, it was a busy, bustling port. About a mile upstream from here is the village of Hamsey. It sits on a triangle of land which splits the river as it curves down towards the town. Hamsey is barely a village today. A few houses with the 13th century church standing in splendid isolation. But Hamsey was a Saxon port in the pre-Norman era. Historians estimate that over 1,000 people lived here, populating a port that saw ships sail up the Ouse to trade goods. There is no doubt that the Normans had a bit to do with its demise. The area was handed over to a Norman lord. But the community was attacked by an enemy it couldn't stop. An army of rats, which disembarked from one of the visiting ships, went ashore and infected the village with bubonic plague. The Black Death. The disease devastated Hamsey. And while there is no historic evidence, legend has it that the residents barricaded themselves in to prevent unaffected people coming in and diseased people getting out. Eventually, they starved to death. Named after the black rats which carried the plague, the Black Death killed over half the population in Britain between 1348 and 1349. The survivors founded another village off Ham, the modern thriving village of Opham. The plague attacked Lewes several times over the following centuries, each time causing significant loss of life. So death continued to stalk Lewes, bringing tragedy to the high street in rather greater measure than other UK high streets. Hamsey gone, but Lewes as a port flourished. Ships and barges plied their trade up and down the Ouse, creating an exciting and bustling waterway. Many of these buildings, which stand on an extension of the high street in an area called Cliff, are built with old ship's timbers. Where Argos now stands was a sailor's pub called the Bear, built as a brewery in 1787. and it succumbed to the carelessness of revelry and burned down in 1918. This quiet domestic street, which runs for a short distance parallel to the Ouse, was the sailors' playground, and history relates that there were more than a dozen brothels successfully operating. Today, this street is known as Little Chelsea. Even the name makes it seem a nice place to live. The rather small abodes found favour with many modern Louisians and are now favoured homes. And why not? They look good in a twee kind of way. And if you're not living in a former brothel, there are other historical backgrounds to raise the interest. All this talk of pubs and trading around town, it saps my energy. So I sometimes come to this little oasis. The Notts Garden in Southover Park. A lovely little hideaway. Back to the High Street, or at least its extension into the cliff area of Lewes. So I've been wandering around here because Lewes is full of antique stores and models. As I mentioned, go inside some of these shops and you'll find that they're supported by old ship's timbers. Another reminder of the days when Lewes was a port. All this talk of water has made me thirsty. I made several mentions of the time Lewes had 63 pubs. As you would expect, among the 16 that are left, there are some with strong ties to the community. Over the road from the shops, held up by ship's timbers, is the Gardener's Arms. There seems to be a tradition in Lewes, although no one admits to it, of omitting the epithet pub or tavern. This pub is called by locals simply the Gardener's. And the Gardener's it was. The origins of this pub go back to when it was an ordinary house, owned by a gardener. Often, after work, he would invite other gardeners into his front room for a drink. Eventually, it made sense to formalize the ritual. So it turned into a pub. The Gardener's is a true pub. Unusual now, it only serves pork pies and sausage rolls. Yet each year it's in the top tier of finalists for Pub of the Year. Magnificent. Back to the Street of 1,000 Brothels. Well, perhaps not 1,000, but a few anyway. There's a pub called the Snowdrop. Nice pub, they tell me. Interesting for its name and where it stands. This is the site of England's deadliest avalanche. Just after Christmas in 1836, heavy snow built up on the edge of the downs. There were 7 cottages here where the pub now stands. Despite warnings, the people living there went about their business, totally unconcerned about the snow. Then whoosh, down it came, demolishing 7 cottages and taking the lives of 8 people.
Time, gentlemen, please.
Not heard now but the admonishment of past landlords that it was time to quit drinking. Should have been heeded by the cottagers. A disaster both for the country and the town. A brief mention of one last hostelry, the John Harvey Tavern. Named after the founder of a local brewery, the one of 16 to survive to the modern day, Harvey's has been around since at least 1790. And an important inhabitant. Along with Mole and Ratty on the banks of the River Ouse. More on that later. For the moment, back to the bar. How I wish I'd lived in Lewes when it had 63 pubs. Bliss. You might think, from the pubs I've been into, that Lewes is a drinking town. The town constable in the late 1800s didn't think so. The town constable in 1890 didn't want it to be. Here are some notes from the High Constable of Lewes, a gentleman called John Holman, dated 1880. Sunday, the 10th of October, visited all the public houses during morning service. All in good order, except Lewes Arms, several there tippling in service time. Sunday, the 17th of October, visited public houses, all in very good order, except the Lewes Arms. Again, a second time, several persons in both parlour and taproom tippling at 11:30 o'clock, time of divine service. Gave the landlord a caution. Sunday, the 14th of November, visited public houses as usual, witnessed very great indecency in the person of George W. Several persons were tippling during divine service, and on our approach to do our duty, they were permitted to hide themselves upstairs in the pub. This was the third or fourth offence of the same kind. Wow, bit different today. But beer is very close to the hearts of this Sussex town, because it's one of the main employers and industries. Earlier, I mentioned the John Harvey Tavern. John Harvey started his brewery on the banks of the River Ouse in 1790. He was one of the 16 that flourished here at one time. Now, with just the odd microbrewery popping up here and there, it's the only one. The brewery is close to the hearts of the community. The pubs it owns have in the main remained traditional, while its method of delivery has most definitely remained in the past. Miles Jenner is the chief brewer, and his range of beers reflects the activities of the local community. The dray that trots around town is a symbol of the tradition of the brewery, but also of the town. The beer maker turns out beers named after local events: Firecracker, Tom Paine, Bonfire Boy, and Lewes Castle. The name Harvey, synonymous with Lewes. You've been around, or the brewery has been around for quite a long time. Can you develop a little bit of the history for us?
Yes, the family came down, the Harvey family, from London. They were wine and spirit merchants at the end of the 18th century, and they started brewing in Lewes and on this site in the early 19th century.
I can stand next door to a man in a pub in Lewes, and he will swear that Harvey's tastes quite different to anything else, and he won't drink anything else. I mean, what's the secret of the product?
Any brewer's beer is really a derivative of his water and yeast strain. We never talk of water, we talk only of liquor, but a local water supply and the brewer's yeast strain, it gives his beer an individual character. you could take our recipes, exactly the same raw materials, go and brew at another brewery with their water and all their yeast and have a totally different brew at the end of it.
Talking of water, and you mentioned that the barges came up the Ouse. How important was that to the brewery in the past?
Well, I think it was very important. It was, you know, a fundamental form of communication, and if you were bringing a fair few tons of barley upstream, then it was a very sensible way of delivering. But just as industry sent stuff out to the river, so the river sent stuff back to them, and it wasn't unusual to brew with river water around your feet. And the last big flood we had in 2000, we were 6 foot deep in river water. We got our product together very well, we had a good reputation, the brewery was re-equipped, and we were producing a beer which became very much identified with the local community and was dear to their hearts. The fact the building is actually known as Lewes Cathedral tells you something about the way that Harvey's is viewed in Lewes.
The brewery flourished, but Lewes as a port rapidly declined. The familiar barges that had plied the River Ouse in the early 19th century carried loads of clay to the town. But the clay was used to build the beds for railway lines, and the death knell for river traffic sounded. The ships had consigned themselves to history. The first train to run from Lewes was in 1846. Since then, the railway has become an important junction in the national network. Trains from Lewes station run to Brighton in the west, Hastings in the east, Newhaven Port in the south, and London in the north. There have been successes and failures. Other lines were axed over time, with one, the Bluebell Railway, preserved as a steam preservation project. Back to our tale of the High Street. Cliff High Street is an extension of the High Street ending at the base of the Downs. At the end of it is an ancient church, St. Thomas of Becket. The Black Death wasn't the only medieval disease to strike Lewes. Leprosy was rife. This infectious and unsightly blight is first recorded in Lewes in soldiers who took part in the Battle of Lewes. It seems that the monks of the priory tended leprous people in 2 hospitals. Of the larger hospital, St. Nicholas, little remains, but the smaller hospital of St. James also treated lepers. Bones of the hundreds who died in the Battle of Lewes showed that leprosy was widespread.
Don't wear this hat to look pretty, you know. There's a Sherlock gene in me somewhere that gets me into more trouble than enough. So I'm going to stick my head above the parapet and suggest that there's evidence of leprosy here long before the Normans paddled ashore at Hastings. The Church of St. Thomas of Becket in Cliff, that's the very far end of the High Street, up against the Downs, has a leper's slit. This was a channel built into the church wall, so that lepers could take Holy Communion without infecting the congregation. St. Thomas's is a very ancient church, with bits of it predating the Normans by quite a few years. The interesting thing about this slit is that it starts and ends inside the church itself. Additions were made to the church over the years, so it appears that the leper's slit was built into the original church, but encompassed within it as it was enlarged. Certainly leprosy entered Europe about the 4th century, but was only virulent in the 11th. But it seems that the disease was already in Lewes well before that. Anyway, the Cluniac Priory tended to lepers until a certain king's greed and love life shut the priory down. So leprosy could be added to the Black Death as a scourge of Lewes. But let's shuck off the historic events of bloody Lewes and celebrate the river, the way that our friends in Wind in the Willows did, the lovable Mole and his friend Gung-Ho Ratty. Each summer, a raft race is held on the Ouse by the local round table. Teams from organisations, schools, businesses and even groups of individuals construct weird and wonderful rafts and race each other from Lewes down to the sea at Newhaven.
Not a very fair race. The crews bombard each other with flour and water bombs, water pistols, and any other old rubbish. Spectators add to the mayhem by pelting other missiles at the crews.
The first few hundred meters are quite torrid, because from the bridges here, people hurl flour bombs and eggs and all sorts of things at you, really. But when you get past Lewis, it's quite peaceful and serene down the river, and you've got the tide to help you along as well. Last year the theme was the Rio Olympics, so again it was quite open to interpretation. You could just take Brazilian culture or, of course, the Olympics. I actually took part last year. I duly sank in New Haven Harbour, unfortunately. But obviously we put the proper safety provisions in place, and we were fished out before we were swept out into the English Channel. There's been suggestions this year that there would be pirate rafts and people drinking rum and trying to board other people's boats, but we'll see how that happens. We're limited for safety reasons to 25 rafts. In the next number of weeks, we're going to have talks with all the safety bodies, and perhaps we may be allowed more, but obviously safety is our main priority. This year I've been absolutely inundated with applications. I think I've sent out over 100 application forms.
Wow! Now, how do you select which of the 25 are going to be lucky?
It's down to, in a lot of cases, the event is sponsored. So in many cases, sponsors may get priority, but overall, it's just a lottery, really. And or the best rafts will be chosen.
Now, in fundraising, do people just donate, or what do? Do you have people shaking cans?
There's a certain amount of bucket collections, and also there's an entry fee for the raft race itself. A good portion of that money goes to the actual operational costs of providing the safety provisions and so on. But obviously, whatever's left over will go to the local charity.
Right.
This year, we're also in partnership with New Haven Town Council, because they really wanted to get more involved, because obviously it finishes there. So this year we will be supporting a charity in Lewis and a charity in New Haven.
A lot of people line the banks. Do you take an estimate of how many people are here on a good Sunday?
We would estimate maybe 5,000 to 7,000, but we've no way of telling, really. But it seems to be a very popular event, and the people of the town have taken it to their hearts.
Yes, indeed they have. I mean, it's a wonderful occasion. After all the bloodshed and death in this little town, that regatta makes me feel a lot better. Time for a little nap, I think. Yes, it wasn't my fault that time. There seems to be one or two gremlins around today. I thought you might be interested to know that on this day, 1,040 some odd years ago, 1066, William the Conqueror, then Duke of Normandy, invades England, landing at Pevensey Bay, Sussex. So there you are. It was all starting to happen on this very day in 1066. So let's see, that's September the 28th, 1066. Goodness gracious, gracious me. Fancy that.
a thorn in the flesh of the people in Battle, which is a lovely little town, just not very far from Hastings. But they get very upset that the Battle of Hastings is really the Battle of Battle. And this little town fiercely defends the fact that the site of the Battle of Hastings is very much set in their town. And the Battle Abbey, which the conqueror built to celebrate his victory, is there as well, not in Hastings. And so is the battle site. So there is always a tug of war. But the Battle of Hastings is not the Battle of Hastings, it's the Battle of Battle. So there you go. Also on this day in history is, and this was a Christmas theme, surely, St. Wenceslas. Good King Wenceslas looked out as he was murdered by his brother, Boleslaus I of Bohemia. And that was in 935. In 1781, on this day, 9,000 Americans and 7,000 French troops began the siege of Yorktown in the United States. And in 1887, the Yellow River, or Huanghe, flooded in China, killing between 900,000 and 2 million people. It was one of the deadliest natural disasters ever to occur in history. And in 1939, the German-Soviet frontier treaty is signed by Joachim von Ribbentrop and Vyacheslav Molotov. And it redrew the German and Soviet spheres of influence in Central Europe and transfers most of Lithuania to the USSR. We're always busy giving somebody else away when these treaties are signed. So that's what happened in the past on this day in history. I might just carry on for a moment about the Battle of Hastings, which was not the Battle of Hastings at all. But if you wish to really get the feel of what happened there, trip to Battle, which, as I say, is on the main London to Hastings railway line, and you get off 3 or 4 stops before you get to Hastings, and it's a lovely, very nice little town, and worth taking a trip into it. It's got some nice little pubs, tea shops, you name it, the sort of things that. Good morning. How are you this morning?
Yeah, we're okay. Why Stuart?
Stuart is not well. Neither is young Max.
Yeah.
So it's me holding the fort this morning.
Oh, I got you.
Lena, isn't it? Lena?
Yeah.
My lovely Lena, who comes in and boxes me around the ears every Wednesday. And she's in this morning. So we'll go and say hello to her later. But she's in asking after Stuart and Max, both of whom are a little under the weather today. Yes, I was saying go to take a visit to Battle. Very interesting small town, and once again very historic, and it certainly has all the trappings of the Battle of Hastings, the Norman conquest, we might call it. Indeed, it does. Okay. Well, we were going to show something there, but we didn't get a chance. So we'll do it now. Here we go. This will be of interest, I think. Now, once again, not, I may say, our fault. The video dropped out. So the system that we use this morning, it sometimes does have a headache, sometimes does do naughty things like that. It is now 10:35 on the 28th day of September, 2022. And a year in which all sorts of dreadful things seem to happen, and we can't do anything about it. But here is some of the brief news items from around the district. A home woman tells of physical and mental abuse at a Lewis trial. Let's see whether we can get the details of that, because it sounds like an interesting story. Right. Is well, that's going to be an interesting one. It's taking place at Lewis Crown Court right now, and it is a modern slavery issue. Goodness gracious me! That doesn't come up very often, even though it is supposed to be widespread. But I don't want to log in with Facebook. I'd like to go back to what I had before. But of course, it is always very difficult to do these things. Apologies. When things go wrong, they go wrong, and they always go wrong on the day that you're on your own and struggling anyway. It is crazy. So what we really need is to get rid of all this stuff, if only we could. Here we go. Okay. Sussex police apologise after a row over a transgender sex offender's status. I can't get excited about transgender people. They are, they're not, they're not. Why on earth we need to treat them any differently to anybody else, I have no idea. Officer breached professional standards of behaviour by using excessive force when arresting a juvenile. Oh dear, 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 dear. I don't envy the lot of a policeman nowadays. Whatever he does is he's damned if he does, and he's damned if he doesn't, and it's sad. Hove drinks license opposed at a small beach coffee company. Right, the locals are getting all upset, I expect. A new micro pub is planned for Saltine, but some neighbours oppose it. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. And Brighton residents raise concern over Hanover Road closures. Brighton Hove City Council launches a £30,000 emergency food fund to support most vulnerable in the community. So that's the bits and pieces that's going on locally. Well, that's the most that I can deliver for you there, I'm afraid. It is now 10:39. We're some 20 minutes away from the end of our program. I think what we should do is let's just check, because what we bring you is the newspaper front pages, and it isn't as it doesn't necessarily tell us what we need to know for the rest of the day. So let's see if we can find out if there is any update on the news. Let's have a look at the. All right, the government must urgently rethink tax cuts, and that is Starmer is today addressing his own party conference, and what he's saying is, "Look, you made a mistake. You better rethink it." Mind you, yeah, okay. Kwarteng sent a stinging and unusual rebuke by IMF. Well, that was in the early news this morning. But it gives rise to Starmer saying the government has lost control of the economy. There's a US group to fight Scotland's abortion buffer zones. Gosh, all days for life. An American group backs protests outside clinics and will help mount a legal challenge if a new law is passed. Had no idea that we were going to have a new law in Scotland for that. Abortion is always going to be a very difficult thing to look at, isn't it? And the UK must brace for a big early wave of flu, say the experts. People should prepare for a rampant flu season based on what Australia has experienced. And of course, they're going into their spring now as we go into our autumn. So we have to take a look at that. The margarine prices are to rise. The blueberries get cheaper. Well, how's that? You can spread blueberries on your toast instead of margarine. The Royal Mail workers to hold 19 days of strike action. Oh my God. It's okay if you don't get checks in the post, and delightful if that's the way that your bills come in, because you won't have to address them quite as quickly as as you normally do. Home Secretary Rapp's force for policing pronouns. What on earth is that about? He criticizes the Sussex police force for policing pronouns. A police force has been criticised, this is the Sussex Police, by the Home Secretary for policing pronouns after it said it would not tolerate hateful comments about a child's sex offender's gender identity. Suella Braverman intervened after a row erupted about jailed Sally Ann Dixon. Dixon had committed the crimes as a man, and some Twitter users objected to police referring to Dixon as a woman. Sussex police hit back against hateful comments. Miss Braverman accused the force of playing identity politics. The force apologized and deleted the tweet. Oh, I'll be damned. Amazing what happens. Amazing what happens now over what I would consider to be things not worth buying a candle about. It says the town scrubbed from the bus route map. Who's that? Chatteris. The town to be scrubbed from the bus route map. I don't know where Chatteris is. Across Cambridgeshire and Bedfordshire, 20 bus services are to be cut and others reduced. What are those living in a town about to be written off the public transport map altogether? Make of the changes. I still think that they're pissed off. To be quite honest with you, we've got our own issue with our own bus station. I mean, the thing is being closed, and yet the terms of any planning application for reuse are quite clear. And it says that a suitable site, alternative site, must be found. But the developers, whose name I just can't remember at the moment, have gone right ahead and closed the bus station without finding anywhere suitable as a use. And as the councillor we had in yesterday said, what's happened is that they've relocated the bus stops up and down School Hill in Lewis, which is a high street, very steep hill, and the buses are now all lined up that hill. But now it's time for the people with the stores and the shops to come wading in, because they're saying, first of all, people can't park to get to the shops, another contentious issue. But also that the buses are stopping people from having access via a car at all. And so the anti-bus stop people, when I say anti-bus stop people, the people who don't want the bus stop taken down until such time as there's a new one in place, are now getting pretty jumpy, and we can see action starting to spill over into the streets. That's more or less what's happening. Most of the local news we've covered. It is not hugely exciting. It has or can rain down. Let's see. Well, absolutely everything except, oh, here we go. International news is, of course, the first one is a footballing news. Not even going to bother with it. Oh gosh, it's all football news. The latest. How very sad that something called international news should have nothing more than just football stories. I suppose they're important to some people. To me, they're a business story. I think professional football has got out of hand. Okie dokie. Well, let's just take another look, and if we can, and we'll see. Let's see what else we've got to take a look at, shall we? And in the meantime, you don't want to look at my face all the time. It's amazing how many people can't identify the flag or the emblem with the birds on golden birds on a blue background as being the flag of Sussex. A number of people who looked at it and said, "What's that?" I guess we don't identify with local flags or regional flags as much as we used to. I know that as a boy in Warwickshire, that we all knew that the bear with the ragged staff was the Warwickshire emblem and the emblem that was used on Warwickshire flags. Today, I don't think it's quite as keenly followed in the news, but that's what that flag is about. And okay, we're 50. Let's go down to the park. Right. Now, the question of will Yeltsin use nuclear arms to attack in Ukraine does raise its head, because the European Union has said it will retaliate if energy networks are attacked. The EU's top diplomat says the bloc suspects that damage to two underwater natural gas pipelines today was sabotage, and is warning of retaliation for any attack on Europe's energy networks by the Russians or anybody else. And of course, that is the sort of sabotage that is likely to happen, because there is always a silent war wherever there's a noisy war, and this one is being fought very much on pipeline and a source of natural resources. So yes, one can understand that. Is the Hurricane Ian, the latest predictions for Hurricane Ian, which I think is floating up towards the United States, and they're having to get to batten down the hatches. Ski mountaineer Hilary Nelson dies on Manaslu. Oh dear. It looks as if the mountain got the better. She is Hillary Nelson has lost her life on the mountain. Live updates on the Russian-Ukrainian war. Well, let's see. The leader of a far-right party, likely to be Italy's next premier, has reassured the Ukrainian leader of Italy's support for Ukraine as it defends itself from the Russian invasion. So yes, there's a new lady, right-wing lady, prime minister in Italy. One of the interesting things about Italy and this election is that Italy did a few years ago have proportional representation as its a choice of electing its politicians. And then it didn't. It moved back to first past the post, saying that half the problem, Italy had something like 20 or 30 governments in as many years. It was never, ever stable. And so they decided to go to first past the post. But this lady says that she will not change the policy towards Ukraine. And so Italy, with its new government, its new leader, my goodness me, there are a large number of new leaders around. I mean, will France get one? No, I don't think so. Macron was only elected a little while ago. But I mean, Macron is right of centre, I suppose. In Rome, the leader of the far right, we need to, yes. Russia prepares to annex occupied Ukraine despite outcry. Because they had a referendum. I don't know what the result was of the referendum. But Putin has said it doesn't matter. We are going to make parts of Ukraine Russian territory again. Russia is posed to formally annex areas of Ukraine where it has military control after a referendum there reportedly endorsed Moscow's rule. Oh dear. Russia is poised to formally annex areas of Ukraine, and after the referendum there reportedly endorsed Moscow's rule. But the ballots were widely discredited and earned the Kremlin no relief Wednesday from international pressure over its assault on its neighbor. The pro-Moscow administration of all four occupied regions of southern and eastern Ukraine said Tuesday that their residents voted to join Russia in 5 days of Kremlin-orchestrated balloting. But I actually wouldn't be too keen to rush in and condemn the Russians on this one. I worked in Lugansk, near the Russian border in Ukraine, and got to know the feeling of the people there. And they very much, the older people, were very keen that they should come back under the Russian sway. And although they're part of Ukraine, I think that some of those areas may well, in a referendum, make it touch and go as to whether that territory should go back to the Soviet Union or stay with Ukraine. People in the east of Ukraine do actually speak Russian, whereas the people in the west of Ukraine speak Ukrainian. So it is a touchy one, that I think, as to which way the Russians should go and which way the Ukraine should go. It's 10:58, and my mouth is getting very dry. I think it's a time for us to say goodbye. I've tried my best and been on my own, to give you a smattering of absolutely everything this morning, as usual. Whenever you get somebody like me in this sort of situation, it always happens. It always happens with a few technical things going wrong. And then, of course, when I try to put them right, I exacerbate the situation. And it always goes wrong. And that's the long and short of it. So what we will do now is we will actually find a little something to actually say goodbye. Good morning. Right, we said good morning, but he didn't say good morning back. But just a little something here to remind you. It's time to say goodbye, isn't it? Okay, Toodle Pip. I will see you tomorrow morning, and we will have. Let's see, it's Thursday. I will probably be with Liza Page. The young man is not well. I told him to go back to bed for a couple of days, and so I will fill in for him tomorrow. You're going to have to put up with me for a morning again. And along with Liza is that can promise fireworks as well. We do nothing but argue all the time. All right, till then, toodle pip.